Film with family. Film with family. Film with family. They love their family. They love the movies.
Hello and welcome to Film with Family, Extended Family. I'm Zach.
And I'm Austin.
We're two cousins who love to talk about movies. And we are continuing our animal series on the Patreon here. We're going to talk about two movies, two documentary movies actually. One called Gates of Heaven by Errol Morris, and the other called Grizzly Man by Werner Herzog. And to talk about it, we have my buddy Wes Holkeboer returning to the podcast. How you doing, Wes?
Hey, good. How's it going?
Good to see you again, Wes.
Yeah, you too. How's it going, Austin?
Great.
You may remember him from our whaling episode last October. And now he's our first friend to make it behind the paywall. So you should feel honored about how few people will listen to this.
This is big. This feels a lot more special than the last one. I didn't want to be outside of the paywall. I want this for real film with family heads only. So.
Are you on the Patreon?
Not yet. Not I haven't converted yet.
Well, you'll have to buy your own episode.
I'll do
to
it.
listen to it.
Yeah, we can't help you. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't send you the file or anything like that.
No.
It's out of our hands.
Yeah, you're gonna have to talk to Patreon about that.
But since we're talking about animals for this series, I wanted to throw a couple softball lobs at you, Wes. How do you feel about animals?
Good. Yeah.
Great. All right, moving on.
Well, do you have any pets?
Yeah, I got a little guy. Got a little cat named Henry over there looking out the window right now. How old is he? Coming on a couple of years, maybe. Goodness, he was an alley cat who just came into my house one day, and then I couldn't find anyone to take him from me, and so he just stayed, and now he's called Henry. He lives here.
Can you talk about like how you kind of acquired him, like specifically? Because it's kind of a funny story.
My housemate leaves the back door open all the time for her dog. So it got cold one day in the fall. And so Henry like ran in, nameless and starving, and she went into my basement. And then she texted me saying, "Hey, I think there's a cat in the basement." So I went down there and I was just gonna like at least trap, neuter, release, do the TNR thing for him. But ended up feeding him a little bit, getting him eventually he would eat some of those little cat tubes, and he would like hide, and I would show him the tube and he would hiss at it, but then he'd have some and I'd move it again and he'd hiss more. And eventually once he got comfortable eating out of the tubes, I made a little trap like in a cartoon or something with little dots, like a little trail of like cat tube mixture towards this box that was on a stick with a string on it. So waited till he was under the box and pulled out the stick and it fell on top of him. I captured him like that and brought him upstairs to this room. And he just like lived in my upstairs for a couple months, hissing at me whenever he saw me, and eventually was able to tame him. He became a purrer, and now he's just a sweet boy. Very loving cat, very food motivated still. I bet I could catch him in a box the same exact way if I had to.
Really channeling your inner Wile E. Coyote with that one.
Yeah, yeah.
What is a cat tube?
They're like little tubes of like cat sauce. They're like this.
Like tuna?
Yeah, I guess they're not generally cat flavored. They're like chicken or like salmon or tuna. But they're like you squeeze out the tube. They're like about as big as your finger. And you squeeze the stuff out, and they come out of the end of the tube, or you can just put them on the food.
Call them cat go-gurts too.
Yeah, they like go-gurt. Yeah.
So is Henry the only animal you've ever owned?
I had dogs growing up. Family had a lot of Wheaten Terriers, very emotional animals. Sort of turned me off dogs a little bit. They're so anxious and like a separation anxiety. But I've been very close to those dogs in the past. They just need a lot of care and attention throughout the day. Rufus was my first dog that was mine back in the day.
Oh, there's a really notable Rufus in Gates of Heaven. Did you notice that?
And the gravestone?
Yeah, he's wearing a
Yeah,
bucket hat.
yeah.
It's like a hound dog with a bucket hat on.
That was my dog.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, your
Yeah,
dog is very cool. Cool looking
it was
dog.
cool. We grew up in California in the 60s. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I thought of you to come on this podcast because I think a few months ago you texted me that you were watching Gates of Heaven or like rewatching it and like just like saying how much you love that movie, and then me and Austin were talking about doing an animal series a couple months later. Then I kind of clicked like, oh yeah, we could talk about that. And then we kind of decided to combine Herzog with that because we were already talking about Herzog with his Burden of Dreams episodes that we're doing this month. And so, yeah, it all worked out like that. But I wanted to ask you, what's your history with Gates of Heaven, Wes? And why do you like it so much?
Oh, yeah. I watched it a few years back, and just thought it was really enjoyable. And like in my memory, it feels like a bunch of like characters out of a Coen Brothers movie. Like
Yeah.
they're that like well-rounded and like characterized, almost caricatured into these like very specific people who are all just like such wild figments of their time. Why not?
Mhm.
And so yeah, and I remembered it being super good, and then hadn't watched it for a few years. So watched it again, watched it on like some to be with ads thing. But it was good to rewatch it and watch it. I got like an AMC Plus thing, so I could watch it with no ads, and I think it's better with no ads.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's just like, yeah, very complex, very American, hilarious, and heartbreaking movie with just some of like better characters than most fiction movies. And it's just like people performing their love of their pets, sort of. So,
We should probably describe a little bit what Gates of Heaven is before we get into it. Gates of Heaven, directed by Errol Morris, came out in 1978. And this was Errol Morris's debut film. And now he is probably one of the, if not the most acclaimed documentary filmmaker in America. He's made some incredible films such as Fog of War, Thin Blue Line. Do you guys have a history with Errol Morris at all, like in terms of enjoying his films? Do you have like a favorite Errol Morris film?
not a ton. I think the only one I've seen beyond this is Thin Blue Line, which
Yeah.
was awesome. Uh, but of the two, this one's certainly my favorite.
Yeah, sadly to say, this is the only Errol Morris film I've seen.
Wow.
So I don't know what's going on with this guy. I guess he's directed over 40 films, so he's done a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. I mean, Austin, you're more of a documentary guy, so have you seen more of his movies than me?
Oh yeah. I've seen a lot of his films. Yeah, he was very inspirational to me during my college years. And one of the things that he's made that I really love is this documentary series called First Person, if you can ever get your hands on them. It's just about interesting people, and he just interviews them, does a little bit of recreation, which is something that he's known for as a documentarian, is like doing like recreational scenes of, true life stories. And it's kind of a controversial, or I guess just like his own spin on documentary. So during Thin Blue Line, which is kind of like a murder mystery, it's one of like, one of the original documentary murder mystery films. And, it's all about the killing of a cop. And so he recreates over and over like the scene of the police pulling over this guy who eventually murdered him. And then one of my favorites, which is very similar to First Person, is a movie called Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, which is about like four very random guys that like seemingly don't have any connection to each other. So there's one guy who like shapes hedges, like a topiary gardener, and then another guy who studies hairless mole rats, and then another like MIT scientist and who makes like robots. So it's like, and then a lion tamer. And so it's like how all these three guys with like very different jobs somehow all relate to each other. Really great film.
Nice. I was gonna ask if he ever returns to the animal well, but it sounds like he kind of does with that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, like there's these great shots of this guy doing the lion tamer stuff, and then like all of these really cool shots of him getting into the, the little dens of these mole rats. Errol Morris, one of the cool things that he does is kind of challenge the notion of documentary. He even wrote a book about some of the early photographs of the Civil War that are like known as like some of the first documentary images. And I've seen him talk endlessly about the fact that like these photos were doctored in a way, like the photographer like moved the cannonballs around so they were more visible. And so it's like, what is truth, like should he have just left the photo as is untouched, or was it better, historically, to like kind of see the cannonballs, and is that actually more accurate because they were in the scene but just not placed exactly where they were. So yeah, I don't know. Errol Morris, fascinating guy. Gates of Heaven, good.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like watching like these documentaries back to back, like to some level, like you get the impression that like in terms of like artifice and like what is real and what is facsimile, like these people you can tell are not exactly the same people when they've got the camera on them as they do when there's no camera in front of them. And there's just so much. I was thinking so much about performance when watching both of these films and the way people like choose to present themselves and like get their messages across or fail to. Yeah, when it comes to doing the recreations, it's like to what extent is that, like it's not like that's not happening.
Yeah, but to an extent I would say that Gates of Heaven is not as heavy on like the recreation as his other films. I mean, obviously this is one of his earlier works, but this is just very much a Talking Heads film. I was saying to Zach, we could probably post just the audio of the entire film, and you would get a good sense. But there is such great imagery in this too.
Yeah, Wes, what do you want to like kind of state what the general premise of Gates of Heaven is?
Gates of Heaven follows the story of people. One guy who starts a pet cemetery in California that I believe eventually the pets get moved to a different pet cemetery. And just very broadly, it is interviews with people who were engaged with the business, people who had their pets at the cemetery, people from competing businesses or other types of businesses like the glue factory. Just follows this type of business and the people who interact with it, and like California in the early 70s.
I'll say this is my second time seeing this movie. But I think the first time I might have fallen asleep during it because the second half of the movie felt very new to me on rewatch. Like I remember the original guy with his cemetery, the bald guy. I think his name's Floyd something. I remember that stuff really strongly, and the rendering plant guy and all his like dickish bravado. But yeah, I like totally all the stuff with like the new family, the two brothers and the dad who get the bigger cemetery and run it like a more of a proper business.
Hmm.
All that stuff felt really new to me on this rewatch. So maybe this is my first time watching the whole thing. But yeah, I think this movie's great. Yeah, just it feels like it has a very strong visual identity for it being a first film.
Hmm.
Just the way he like frames a lot of the interviews are like kind of like straight on kind of interview, like the person's like kind of in the center of the frame.
Hmm.
Like the first shot of the movie is like that huge wide shot of the Floyd guy in front of that big tree, and it
Hmm.
just makes a big statement right away. And yeah, there's barely any B-roll, like you're saying. It's just like talking heads mostly, and it's a very interesting film. It definitely takes a certain amount of patience, just because it is a more of a slower paced kind of thing. But I think yeah, like you're saying about the characters of it all makes it really worth it.
And just going to what you're saying about like the visual element of the film and the way that he centers his subjects, that's something that carried with him through his whole career. He's actually known for developing this type of interview using two teleprompters called the Interrotron. Do you guys know about this?
No.
No.
So basically, it's you take two teleprompters and have the person who's being interviewed be in one room and the person who's doing the interview be in the other room. And so Errol Morris's face is being projected right in front of the lens of the camera. So when he does his interviews, the person is literally looking Errol Morris directly in the eyes. So when you see that on film, the person who is talking to you in the documentary film really feels like they're locking eye contact with you. So I think one of the first movies he did that with is Fog of War with Robert McNamara, and he's talking about these horrible atrocities of Vietnam, and he's just staring right into your eyes, and it's very, very effective. And I think it's something that a lot of documentary filmmakers do now. He kind of like set a standard for that. So I don't know. It's just really, I think it's really brilliant move because it does add like a level of intimacy to all of his films. He wasn't doing it with this one, but it still maintains that kind of effect of just like feeling like you're talking directly with the subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like he created that like to try and get this effect in a more direct way, sort of
Hmm.
um, what he does get from this film. Because everything is very centered. Everyone's like uh, almost like a Zoom call like we're on right now, but and like well framed. Like what's
Yeah.
behind the characters is extremely intentional,
Yeah.
and so everyone looks very much a part of their environment.
Hmm.
Yeah, as a fan of Wes Anderson, I felt very pleased. I was like, yes, this is an aesthetic that I enjoy.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it's cool that he was doing it in 1978.
Hmm. Yeah, there's that great shot of one of the characters like sitting poolside with like a red phone next to him. Like it's like very strange. Why would he have a red phone out by the pool? But I guess it was the 70s, so
Because he's a
diff-
business guy, man.
yeah.
The insurance fund. That guy was so funny.
Yeah.
Everything he was talking about, his like business tactics. He had like the R2A2 method.
Hmm.
He was talking about. I wrote some of this down. He was talking about know-how versus activity knowledge.
Yeah.
He's just talking in like
Yeah.
just fake stuff that he was making up, or um,
Something you read in like a self-help book or something, like how to
yeah.
run a business or whatever.
uh,
Um,
oh my god.
there's so many great characters in this film. Do you guys have any other moments in particular that you like?
Yeah, it's like something about like a cat dying in a dryer or like a story
Oh
to that
God, yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
I remember that sticking out as crazy. And also the rendering plant guy just talking about how like they like would take elephants from the zoo and like they had to do it secretly.
Yeah.
The zoo didn't want they knew they'd get some flack if they were like getting their elephants rendered down, but they're a hassle to bury, so they just like take them to the tallow place or whatever. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I gotta play a clip of that guy. So there's this one character. He's a guy who runs the rendering plant, which is basically where like animals just go to get burned up and turned into glue. I don't know how that works,
Glue or tallow or
yeah.
something useful.
But he talks very gleefully about how people are disturbed by his job.
It's controversial. In other words, we stay low key. We don't want people to know we're bringing in animals and reprocessing animal byproducts. I don't know. Some people get nauseated by the thought. They get nauseated by it. You know that? You know what actually nausea? I mean, I've had people ask me. I've been at a dinner party and been sitting down at a dinner table, and somebody will say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Hey, I'm in the tallow business." And somebody will say, "Oh, geez, don't bring that up right now, huh? Wait till after dinner when we all break up." I mean, in other words, we don't want to talk about what you do, Mike. It makes us sick. Why? I don't know, but it does. People say that all the time.
Like, how can you be
So
that
many.
oblivious to the idea of your job being to like dispose of pets and burn them and turn them into like tallow? And then be like, what's wrong with that? People
Yeah,
are
yeah.
nauseated.
Him like posed like versus like the sweetest man in the whole world, who like
Right.
his pet dies and he wants to make the pet cemetery originally, and he's like, these are gifts from God for our fellowship and we need to do something special for them, and then it goes to
Yeah.
this guy. And like him like them as like foils for each other is incredible. Like that is, for me, it was like the most memorable part of the film was these two guys and their differences, an opinion. All felt very American. And both these guys are so funny just because they're so like such caricatures,
Hmm.
of like guys who you would imagine having those views.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of miss those two guys in the back half of the film, but
Yeah.
it makes sense that like how the movie's kind of split up into the two sections,
Hmm.
like representing the two different cemeteries and the people that deal with them. But yeah, there also is that nice like kind of in between those two sections. There's like that old lady that just like is monologuing what feels like for like 10 minutes, just rambling about nothing or everything. I don't know. That I really like that
The
lady.
lady in the door frame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's an old woman.
Yeah, I have no idea what she's talking about. She's like talking about her son like getting a job and that he like owes her money, but I did not understand where she fit into like the pet cemetery of it all. It's around that time during that interview that Errol Morris flashes up that news article about 450 pets being moved to Napa, which is actually the article that Errol Morris read that inspired him to make this film. Like he saw that article and was like, all right, I need to track down this pet cemetery and figure out how they did that. And then it kind of led him to all these characters.
Yeah, I just like that. That's just like one unbroken shot too. There's like no editing involved. It's just like her just going on and on.
Yeah. And you can like there's that one great like there's like a car screeching in the back And she's like, "Oh, what was that? Was that a car?" And then like you hear like somebody listening to like, "Why can't we be friends?" like in the background. Like they're like right by a street. So great.
When it shows that article, it's like the one break in her scene, which it's not like a cut, like the audio continues, but she's like taking a long pause in between talking. And so it shows like a newspaper spinning and
Hmm.
just spins for like a little
Hmm.
bit longer than you would think that it would need to.
Yeah.
And then it shows like the headline
Hmm.
400 pets moved to Napa.
Yeah.
Good headline visuals, or like how he blows them up and
Hmm.
lights them up. It looks good.
Yeah. It gives them like a little keyhole.
Hmm.
Um, so should we talk a little bit about the connection between this movie and Werner Herzog and Les Blank for that matter, somebody who we've been covering extensively this month and will continue to next week with our interview with Harold Blank. There's a film that Les Blank shot called Werner Herzog Eats His Shoe. Have you guys watched this movie?
Yeah, I watched it in preparation for this.
Same.
Basically, Herzog encouraged Errol Morris as an assistant of his to make a film, and he saw how much he documents things and was kind of pushing Errol Morris to make a film. And he said, if you make a film, when you do that, I'll eat my shoe. And so he made Gates of Heaven, and Herzog stuck to his guns and boiled his shoe in front of a University of California campus and cut it up and ate his leather shoes.
Wasn't that like a screening of Gates of Heaven that he did
Yeah,
it?
it was like see the movie and see Herzog eat his shoe. This was actually the film that put Les Blank and Herzog in contact with each other, and which led to Burden of Dreams. You've just got some classic Herzog quotes going on in this film.
Yeah, such
Yeah.
as
I wanted to play Herzog's take on
Gates
Gates
of
of
Heaven.
Heaven, because I think he summarizes his feelings on the film pretty well.
It's a film on a family behind all that, with all their failures and all their dreams and all their dramas involved. And it's the only authentic film on love and emotions and late capitalism. And maybe it's the only authentic film on loss of emotions and loss of or distortion of feelings and degeneration of feelings. It's a very, very sad film and very purely done. It's an extremely pure film, very mature film. This guy came there and he did a film, his very first film, and it's a film of a very mature filmmaker. And I really like it very much.
Yeah, so that's Herzog's take on Gates of Heaven.
I had no idea before I watched this. Before Zach told me to watch this, I don't know if I would. I think I would try to make a film if Werner Herzog would like eat his shoe
Yeah, it's pretty good
as
at
a reward.
motivation.
I don't know if I would do as good of a job, but yeah, I was cooking while watching this,
Oh,
and
nice.
I was
Perfect.
and yeah, he was cooking too. He was loading that boot up with hot sauce.
Yeah.
Full clove of garlic or
Yeah.
bulb or
Yeah.
whatever.
Few cloves of garlic.
And onions and yeah. So we had that in common. But
Yeah. So
very
he loads
yeah.
up his shoes with vegetables and then like ties it off on the top, and then they pour like a bunch of duck fat in there and he boiled it for like 5 hours.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I wasn't expecting the cooking of the shoe aspect of it. That was a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great watch. A little 20-minute short. Wes, you liked it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then I just love this speech that Herzog gives when they introduce him up in the beginning to right before he's going to eat his shoe at the premiere or at the screening of Gates of Heaven. This is great.
I didn't mean to eat this shoe in public. I intended to eat it in the restaurant, but I was pushed a little bit into it, and it makes sense to some extent because it should be an encouragement for all of you who want to make films and who are just scared to start and who haven't got the guts. So you can follow a good example. I think it should also, I do this here in public because I want to help Errol's film. It still has no release yet, and it should be released by one of the major studios, then I would be happy. And that's why I'm here. And you shouldn't worry about it. We cooked it for 5 hours, but it's still more stiff than before. So I brought some pair of poultry scissors and some sharp knives. You can have the same experience every single day. You just drop in at a Kentucky Fried Chicken. I've survived so many Kentucky Fried Chicken, so it won't do harm to me.
Yeah, there's some good tidbits about Gates of Heaven in this movie, or he talks about how Errol Morris like fired like 2 or 3 of his cameramen or something before like landing on the guy who ended up shooting the movie.
Yeah, it's a very strong vision. I just love that Herzog quote where he's just like, let this be a lesson to all you coward filmmakers out there who don't have the guts to do it. And at one point too, he was like, you just need to like steal a camera. You need to steal raw stock, like go into a place and develop your like sneak into a place to develop your film. He's just like very hardcore about motivating people to make films. And yeah, he's got a lot of speeches in this about how we need to wage holy war against commercials and talk shows.
He also talks about how like filmmakers are clowns and stuff, and
Yeah.
like doing jackass like stunts like this is something Werner seems to enjoy doing, or seems like he has to do. He like talks about like throwing himself into a cactus.
Yes. Yeah, during Only Dwarves Started Small.
Yeah, do we have any more thoughts on Gates of Heaven? Some more moments we want to shout out, or final thoughts?
We haven't talked about the guitar son at all. I just want to shout
Yeah.
out the guitar son. So there's like the first half of the movie is like there's like 2 main guys. The guy who made the pet cemetery loves pets, and then the guy at the rendering company who thinks that it's really silly to care about pets. And then in the second half of the movie, we've got like 2 sons who are somewhat at odds. One of them is like got burnt out in the insurance industry.
Yeah. He's got lots of trophies.
He's got trophies from his insurance job, being a sales manager there, and because he's less experienced, he joins the family company and has to work for this like the other son who is very romantic, and he plays guitar, and he's like talking about heartbreak and what he's learned from like losing a woman and playing his guitar to the hills in the end.
He's the younger brother, right?
Yeah.
And the older brother talks about how he feels weird about like feeling like second fiddle to his younger brother, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
2 more great characters, and like also in the end there's like lots of talk about like, are we going to see your pets like after they're gone? And the pet cemetery guy is like promising people that they will see their pets in heaven again, and that was interesting. Just it gets very spiritual, and at least talking like the way people are talking about these things is very spiritual. The quote that jumps out is like one of the people whose pets is buried there is like, okay, your dog's dead, but where's the thing that made it move? That's its spirit. And ends up being like really nice. Like none of that is stuff that I believe, but to See people who are like feeling that way is like sort of moving, especially when contrasted with like Insurance Son. Um, so yeah, in terms of like animal movie, my cat just got to fly, I think. In terms of
Speaking of
talking
animals.
talking about animals, um, uh, they do talk a little bit more about animals at the end here.
Yeah, yeah. There's not much animal footage in the film at all. I think I like looked at the time code and it takes like 20 minutes, and you like see that woman like talking her to her dog that's like yelping, and they're like
Oh my God.
a like strange scene of them like talking to each other. But yeah, it's mostly just people. You barely see dog or any pets in the film. You do
Yeah.
get this nice montage of like headstones for the animal cemetery, which is one of my favorite parts of the movie. Just getting to see all the different pet cemetery gravestones. There's one I really liked. It was a cat, and like the lion was my beautiful son, and you could see the years on it, and it was only alive for 1 year, which is like hilarious and tragic at the same time that he felt like this cat was his son and it was only around for a year.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, I mean, I know you already mentioned it, Wes, but the guitar throughout the film is so good. And I love how somebody will be talking about like the spirit of their dog and like going into this like, kind of like philosophical discussion about like where an animal's body goes when it dies. And then it cuts back to the guitar son. He's like, yeah, so I got two PV speakers. Like, he just like goes straight into him, just like breaking down all of his like gear.
And his like guitar playing is pretty funny too. It's like sort of pretty, but then it's like to like be like playing on one theme and then like do something to make it sort of like freak folk and like
Yeah.
very 70s like psychedelic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's that
You
great
should,
shot of him like playing guitar outside and like with the cemetery in the background, which
yeah.
definitely feels like an Errol Morris idea. Like, hey, let's shoot this.
Especially since he like yeah, right before it, people are talking about how they're so happy that they're going to be living in eternity, like in this peaceful place. And you see like the amp like pointed directly at the cemetery. Yeah.
It's that
Very.
Honky Tonk Women by Rolling Stones.
Oh, it might be. Yeah.
I think that's what he's playing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Do you guys have anything else that you want to say about Gates of Heaven before we move on to Grizzly Man?
Yeah, it's a good movie, like a good meditation on death kind of movie, and also people's relationship to their pets, which is great for Animal Month. But
Sure.
yeah, Grizzly Man also is kind of like a meditation on death and humanity's relationship to animals as well, except
Yeah.
going from domesticated animals to wild animals
Hmm.
and just like zooming in on this one guy. But yeah, I think they're interesting movies to kind of pair together. There's definitely some connection points.
Real quick though, because Zach, you've lost a lot of pets. We talked about it last month a little bit. We were talking about Homeward Bound with Caleb. What connection do you have with like the physical bodies of your deceased pets? Like, do you guys bury them or do you send them off to the glue factory or what are you usually doing when a pet passes? Because I've lost a few pets, but I don't really know what happened to them. I wasn't responsible for that.
Yeah, my dad buries them somewhere on our property. Thankfully, we have a lot of property, or my parents do. Buried pets all over my
Oh, wow.
parents' property, including some of the grandparents' pets. Like I know Josie, the dog, is buried in Munich. I think that was Grandpa's wish for her to be buried at like this one spot. Yeah, we never did the pet cemetery thing because we just kind of made our home the pet cemetery, but we never like demarcate like this is where this animal lies. But maybe my dad knows, or he must have some knowledge of it, so he doesn't accidentally dig up one of them. But yeah, I know, and we've also had horses, so some of those, I think those kind of get sent away because we don't really have the space to bury a horse.
Right.
But dogs and cats, my dad buries them. I haven't had the experience of burying any pets myself. I don't know if you guys had any experience with pet cemeteries.
I think I already told the story about us burying my iguana Ajax in the backyard in a tee box. I had a lizard that dried out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I buried him in a tee box in the backyard in the suburbs.
That's sad. Desiccated. I think I buried one of my ex-girlfriend's pet snakes,
Hmm.
but
Oh, okay.
all my animals went to the rendering plant.
So you're pro rendering.
Yes. Call the rendering truck right away.
Got on speed dial.
Yeah. No, I don't know what happens to pets when they die.
They all go to heaven. All dogs go to heaven at least.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a good pet cemetery in Ypsilanti that I visited once, and I don't know, I like to visit a pet cemetery, see all the gravestones, all the pictures of the pets and the funny names. It's a good time.
well, yeah, I mean, both of these films, for Animal Month, they're not really about animals as much as they are about the ways in which people coexist with animals, um, or exist without their animals.